There we go. It looks like we still have people on fall break, some just returning, and I'm back from fall break physically. In my head, I'm still there. Kind of disappointing when I had to put shoes on this morning, but I'll get over that. So people are still trickling in, but we're going to go ahead and get started to respect everybody's time. Just to get started, I don't know that we introduced ourselves last time, so we're going to make sure we get to that. I'm Kevin Stevens. I am a low incident consultant with West Kentucky Educational Cooperative, WKEC. This is my third year in that role, but prior to that, I was director of special ed. But really, my main role when people ask what you do for a living, I'm an MSD teacher at heart, and that's where I spent most of my time in the classroom. But that's a little bit about my background. I'll let Tracy introduce herself.
Hello, I'm Tracy Belfield with the Kentucky Autism Training Center, and I have been here for about 2 years now. Prior to that, I was an assistant director of special ed, and like Kevin, though I am an MSD teacher at heart and spent many years in the classroom doing that before moving into different roles. So we are so excited you guys are here today, just because you play such an important role in everything that happens. So Kevin is going to kick off our presentation today, and then I'll take it over from there.
And just a little bit before we get started, a lot of the things we talk about, people typically think are responsibilities of teachers. And we had that mentioned in the feedback last time, but you all are valued members of our team, any team in education. And although the primary responsibility to develop a lot of these strategies don't fall on your shoulders, but you can be a great assistant in your classroom by giving input and feedback and making suggestions and being part of a team to make a better, you know, well-rounded program that's fully supporting students. So if you see things on here that maybe are not going on in your classroom, maybe the student needs a better visual support or a better visual schedule. Again, those are some of the things we're going to talk about. Now, these things today, we're going to get into how to promote student independence, which is really one of our overall goals in education, to make students more independent individuals. So let me get going on here. So to understand independence and understanding independence and autism, for individuals with autism, independence doesn't necessarily mean doing everything without assistance. Instead, it refers to the ability to initiate and complete tasks with minimal prompting, make choices and decisions about one's own life, communicating needs and wants effectively, navigating daily routines and environments with reduced support, and developing self-advocacy skills. These are all things we could all support our students in becoming more independent. But why this is so critical is becoming an independent individual enhances the quality of life and self-esteem for any individual. And one of the things I hear often is this student's always going to need a level of support in settings beyond high school. They're never going to be fully independent. But in those scenarios, we need to focus on how we can reduce dependence on caregivers. How can we make the student more independent in their lives so they're less dependent on others to provide supports for them? Again, building independence prepares individuals for transitions to higher education and employment, increases opportunity for community integration, and reduces the risk of learned helplessness. And that's one of the things we really talked about in our first session about prompting. When we overprompt, we create kind of a sense of dependence on that level of prompt. So as any educator, especially paraeducators working directly with students in that, it's up to us how to gauge when to pull back our level of supports to really push a student to be more independent. But most importantly, it empowers individuals to have more control over their own lives.
Kevin, when I think about independence too, of course, we consider ourselves independent adults, but I still don't know how to do everything. Part of independence is knowing when to ask for help, who to ask from help for. Again, if my car breaks down, I am not a car person whatsoever, but I know how to call a mechanic, or I know which friends have those abilities if it's a more simple task. So that's an important part of being independent as well.
So some of the principles we're going to talk about are the use of visual supports. And really, we've talked about this repeatedly and we probably will in every session, that visual supports are essential tools for many individuals with autism due to their strengths in visual processing. They help make abstract concepts concrete and provide a reference point for information and expectations. So some of the visual supports you may see in a classroom, again, these aren't in any order, but I will say the first one, visual schedules, are one of the most important things I can see to help promote student independence. It helps prepare them for transition times, to plan their day, and to really wrap their head around what's upcoming and what expectations they need that are going to be on them for the activities. When we talk about these transitions too, visual timers are a game changer for a lot of our students. It's just a visual representation of the actual time. That's why I like the visual timers that decrease gradually and the student can see the time fading away. So they see the expectations visually for that transition time, whether if it's waiting for a task to start or if they're engaged in an activity for a set amount of time. Those visual timers can be a great help. Choice boards help to facilitate decision making, and those can be, we've seen people with those on their lanyards, smaller versions, but just visual representations of choices made available for students. We also have social stories with pictures, a little visual representation of expectations. And then we've seen a lot of our classrooms have really labeled environments. And I do think having that structured environment with clear visuals, everything's labeled, students know where all the materials are and can access them independently. Again, that's the key word there, independently. We're trying to promote students to access everything in their environment independently or with the least amount of supports needed. We also have some structured teaching methods. We often associate that highly with the teach method. Tracy, do you want to explain the teach method a little bit? I know Tracy's our teach expert, resident teach expert in our area for this.
Teach is just a very structured group of materials. Again, it starts with that visual schedules. It's a lot of visual supported type things to make those students very independent, to where they can take those schedule pieces, go to their area to work. You teach it first at a teacher table, but as soon as they've mastered it, you're moving it on to an independent table where the student can hopefully do it independently. And from there, you actually want to move it into an area where they can generalize that skill, because again, that's what's going to get them to that generalization as quickly as possible. So it's all about kind of setting up that schedule system, setting up the physical structure, setting up the structure of the task to where it makes sense in that work system for them. And really, again, independence, independence, independence.
But one of the big components of the structured teaching, regardless which method you're using, is breaking down larger skills into teachable steps. So when we talk about those task analysis, how does the overall skill, can we break that down into individual teaching steps? And then we know when to provide supports on each one of those steps or prompting. But again, that's one of the principles of structured teaching, or really looking at the small teachable steps for an overall bigger skill. We need to practice gradual fading of prompts. This is critical for building student success, student independence. That gradual fading of prompts, if we've got a student that's relying on maybe a partial physical or a full physical prompt, we really need to work getting them towards a less intrusive prompt, whether that be a model or a visual support rather than the physical prompting. So knowing when to back off is critical in building student success. Encourage communication skills. Developing effective communication skills is crucial for independence, regardless of whether a student's verbal or nonverbal, or non-speaking would probably be a better term to use. This is an area I felt the weakest in when I was in the classroom, is fully supporting the student's communication. Rely on your team for this. You should have a cohesive plan for all of your students that may need more supports and communication. And that's going to rely heavily on your speech paths guidance. But if you've got a student that has an AAC, if I'm assisting that student, I want to know exactly how to model the language with that AAC, because we want to move past compliance. And when I say that, remember, this was my weak area in the classroom. When I really worked with students on communication, I was only pushing them to the level of compliance. No, press this word. This is what you mean. That's they're doing that to be compliant. I don't know that they were fully communicating. So there is a way to fully model a language system there with your AAC. So you need to work with your team to really understand that communication process and how to utilize an AAC effectively. Okay.
Okay, so now we're going to kind of talk about each level of school and how we can support those students to be as independent as possible. Elementary, of course, is where we typically start them. And it's very important that we start teaching independence at that level because that, again, is the foundation where everything's going to be built for later on down the road. So Kevin already kind of hit a little bit on visual schedules and routines. Again, we know these are crucial for our elementary age students because they really thrive on that structure and that predictability. So when we're implementing that, we're usually going to use some type of picture-based schedule for their daily activities. These can be actual photographs, they could be symbols, kind of like board maker, or they could even be simple drawings. Some teachers hand draw something that they need quickly and kind of on the fly. So it's as long as your student can understand what that represents, then you're good to go. Of course, you want to arrange those pieces in a very clear sequence, again, to where they know the order that it happens in, and that can be a left to right system or a top to bottom system. It's whatever makes sense and is easiest for your student, because again, you may need to look at motor control and things like that to decide. And you want to make it where the student interacts with the schedule. So they need to be moving those pieces. Usually it's Velcro from a task being completed and kind of going into a finished basket or an envelope or something that says that it's finished. Also, as Kevin said, timers are very important. They help show that time is passing because, again, our students with autism have a hard time understanding time and the concept of time. So things like the time timer that you see there on the slide are great. There's some other fun ones that have like rocket ships that are blasting off or scenes that are shown. I think Kevin mentioned, it might have been last week, that like if you're only going to give a student 5 minutes to do something, rather than using the timer that's here on this slide, you might have a timer that does only have a 5-minute thing on it so that it kind of, and the student's head looks like they're getting more time than they are. Because sometimes when they only see that little tiny sliver, that can be enough to kind of trigger them as well. But as long as you're using timers, that's the biggest thing. It helps the student understand how long activities are going to last. Again, they want to know that there's an end to the things that we are asking them to do, whether it's a task they enjoy or a task that they don't enjoy. And by knowing that there's an end, it really helps reduce that anxiety around that transition and knowing what's coming next. So again, that benefit of reducing that anxiety, increasing that independence, and helping them understand kind of the flow of their daily schedule is really important and to their success. Second thing up there is task analysis and chaining. So again, I think we talked about this a little bit in a previous week. And so a lot of these things you're going to hear over and over because they're just so foundational to a student's success as well as their independence. But task analysis, you see here on the screen, Goblin Tools is a great website that you can go to that will kind of help you break down a task. So it could even be greeting a stranger in the hallway at school if that's something that you're working on. It's going to help you identify the steps required to complete that task because there's a lot more to that than you may think about. And then from that, if you need to create some type of visual supports to go with that, you would be able to do that. Chaining is still using task analysis, but sometimes we do forward chaining where we teach it from the very beginning of the step and we go through the process. There's also backwards chaining where you kind of start at the last step. Tying shoes is something that I see sometimes we kind of start with that last step because some of those beginning steps require a lot of motor control that our students just don't have. But if we can do all of it and get it down to where it's just those two bows, for example, that they have to pull, then they can get that part. And once they've mastered that, they're kind of motivated to learn those other steps. You kind of start backwards and start including them in more of the process. And then, of course, as you build that sequence, eventually they're able to do the entire task. So, I mean, task analysis and chaining can be used for so many things, but hand washing, putting on a coat, putting on your backpack, putting work in a finished basket. So it just takes those really complex tasks and makes them much more achievable and approachable in ways that we can help our students. Because some of these tasks we do day in and day out, and as adults who are able to do them, we don't think about all the little tiny nuances within that task. And so again, really writing out that task analysis. And again, I think Goblin Tool is a great website to help you do that, because it comes up with stuff like, I didn't even think about that because we just do it naturally. So it just makes it much more approachable. It helps build the confidence in our students and really allows for a more systematic way of teaching it, because with Goblin Tools, I can print it out. So the way that I help a student put on the coat can be the same way that Kevin's helping the student put on the coat, because we have it written out in that task analysis way for them. So that helps with consistency as well. Social stories and video modeling is another great strategy for our elementary learners. So these are typically very personalized stories that help describe a lot of times social stories. And so Magic School is up there as a great resource. And I know Kevin has been using this a lot with some of the students that he's been working with. Kevin, you want to just tell them quickly how easy Magic School is to use for a social story?
It is extremely easy, and Magic School is an AI platform that was developed with education in mind. So there are a ton of different options on there. So in the search bar, when you're on Magic School, you can type in social stories, and there's a whole section for that. But you can give a brief description of maybe the area you're trying to focus on, what the expectations should be, what the student's struggling with. You can list all the information in there to kind of start. Like, for example, I'd say create a social story for when a fire drill goes off, how we should exit the building, because that's one of the common problems we see in our classrooms. And it develop a great starter story. And when I say a starter story, I always like to go in and individualize it a little more and tweak it. But again, the whole gist of the story is going to be there, and it embeds corrective or replacement behaviors too. If a student is really struggling with the sound, how they can cope with the sound. But it's a neat tool. I can't say enough about Magic School and actually Goblin Tools since our last training. If you're really wanting to piece together a big task analysis, Goblin Tools is the one to go with. It is awesome. But these the AI technology is just advancing rapidly, like more rapidly than I've seen any technology advance since I've been around. So these tools are going to get more and more useful and meaningful to us and what we're doing. But Magic School is a great one. If you want to get in and play with the social stories, I highly encourage it.
And then, of course, video modeling is really just social stories put into action. We know our kids love watching YouTube videos and things like that. So again, there are some video modeling things out there on YouTube already, but it's really best when you can make your own, kind of like Kevin said, using Magic School, of being able to personalize it, include your own students in that. So they're just really good tools to help those elementary students. And then on our next slide, there's some more strategies that will help our elementary age students. So of course, sensory-friendly environments is something that we've heard a lot about, I think, in recent years. We know our friends with autism, their sensory systems typically work a little bit different than ours. So we need to make sure that we are giving them those sensory breaks and tools, and that those are not things that they have to earn. They are just things that are built into their schedule. It is, again, a need that they have, and so we need to be providing that. So you're going to work with your team. Again, like Kevin said in the opening, yes, your teachers and your therapists are kind of giving a lot of the framework for this, but as paraeducators, you guys are often the ones working kind of the closest with these students. And so you've got a lot of impact to give the teachers, or input to give the teachers and the therapists of, hey, we're still having some struggles at this time of the day. Maybe we need to incorporate another sensory break, or we've gotten better And so we might be able to fade out a sensory break within that. So we just want to make sure that we're providing them access to those sensory items, regardless of what they might be. Some of our kids are going to need bigger movement type things, so movement breaks might be an option. And of course, we have some students that are needing those noise canceling headphones because, again, the noise is just something that can be a little bit overwhelming for them. Providing quiet spaces for them. Now, these quiet spaces do not always need to be outside the classroom. It's actually great if we can keep it with inside the classroom. So you can designate a small little corner, or I've seen some teachers get a little small tent that they put in the classroom, but just a little safe place that's kind of away from everything. Again, it's got the visual boundaries to help define that space. And it's got some of those comforting items, whether it's soft cushions, calming images. It could be the breathing techniques like rainbow breathing that are posted there. I've seen some teachers just take like two filing cabinets and kind of put them side by side with just a little place in between them where the student can sit like on a beanbag or something. And that can create enough of a little quiet area for them. But that really helps the student be able to regulate, reduces that sensory overload that they might be experiencing, which then positively impacts their behaviors that may come from that. And then increases their ability to focus on tasks and other interactions that we're asking of them. And then pairing that with positive reinforcement systems. Again, we've talked about reinforcement is the only evidence-based practice that has to be used with every other evidence-based practice on the list. So here are just some ideas for some positive reinforcement things. There's token economies. So you see some pictures there on this slide of like the punch card or the check marks that they're earning for doing the right thing. And then they're going to earn whatever choice that they've made to get with that. For some of my older students, even using actual money or like PBIS bucks can also be a part of that token system, but it's just a visual system to help them track those positive behaviors. It allows those students to earn those tokens or hole punches for doing their task independently and staying on task for what they need to be doing there.
Sorry.
That's okay. You know, we've seen sticker charts used for this as well. And then, of course, specific praise is used in that as well. All right. Kevin, if you go back one slide, I think.
Don't know how with this there.
Yeah, right there it is.
Sorry.
Okay. So then we'll kind of jump up to some of our middle school students. And again, this could even be upper elementary. So just because it says middle school up there, don't think that it's going to kind of eliminate your elementary students. So self-management techniques, again, we know that's crucial for increasing their independence. It really starts teaching students how to monitor and regulate their own behavior. So when we're teaching self-monitoring skills, we're probably going to use some type of checklist or visual scale. So you see some examples there on the side that lets them track their own behavior or even tasks that they are doing. We can teach students how to use timers on their own if they are ready for that. Help them to kind of figure out their own self-rating scales on various tasks. Kind of like you see that behavior rubric there. So it might be like, were you following directions? Did you raise your hand? Did you stay in your seat? And then there are lots of apps out there. And one of our slides later, we'll kind of highlight some really good apps. And in your resource folder that we will email you after this, we've included a lot of apps that are great for helping with those self-management and even executive functioning skills that we'll talk about with the high schoolers. But this really helps kind of set some goals too, because as you look through this data, you can sit down with the student and kind of talk about, okay, what do you notice that you're struggling on? How can we set some goals to improve in that area? And it really lets the student start taking some ownership with that. The next one up there is functional communication. We want to be mindful of why are they doing the things that they're doing and how can we give them other ways to doing that. Typically, we talk about will and skill. They're typically not just willfully doing things. It's really a skill deficit. They don't know how to tell you that they don't want to do something, or they don't know that their body is needing some type of movement. So we need to expand those communication methods using AAC devices, giving them appropriate ways to ask for breaks. And then, of course, social skills are a great way of incorporating a lot of this stuff as well. We want to incorporate other non-disabled peers into those structured activities, give them time to practice those conversational skills. Um, so again, you see some examples here of how they can ask for a break or even let people know that they need help. All right, Kevin, next slide. So here's some executive functioning. Again, executive functioning is all that stuff that's happening in our brain that helps us with planning, time management, prioritizing, organization. I mean, there's just so many things that we do up here, and our students with autism typically struggle in that area. Our students with ADHD struggle in that area. So there's lots of strategies of using these visuals that we've talked about, using these checklists that we've talked about. Again, we're going to talk about some apps here in just a minute that are very, very helpful. But we want to help support them in those things as much as we can, which kind of goes into that adaptive skills training. Because again, personal hygiene and self-care, it's not that they don't necessarily want to do those things, but there's just so many steps involved that the organization of all of that. So again, visual schedules will help with that, other visual prompts, checklists, things like that. And that even goes into cooking and laundry. And I'm speeding up a little bit because we are getting short on time. Kevin, let's skip the high school strategies. The slides will be in here if we have any high school teachers that want to jump in here. So you can skip this slide and that slide, skip. So just some resources if you want to look into any of this a little bit more. I've got some books listed there. Of course, Temple Grandin is a great person in the field of autism who has lived it herself. So there's a book called The Way I See It. There's also a movie that's on one of the streaming services. Seeing in Pictures, I think is the name of her little documentary. Uniquely Human is a great book. The Reason I Jump, I know Kevin's read that book as well as I have. Of course, we are getting ready to kick off our book study this evening of the 10 things every student with autism wishes you knew. There's some great websites of the ASN, which is the Autistic Self-Network Advocacy. Of course, our website, Kentucky Autism Training Center, has lots of resources, and Ocali is another really good place for resources. And then on the next slide, I think, yes, there's an app for that. So again, for our students that are ready for more digitized type things, and again, remember, independence is our goal. And so as much as we kind of hate technology, we've got to embrace it. Like Kevin said, AI has come so far. You know, when I was in high school and stuff, I didn't have to use my cell phone because they weren't even out yet. But now I couldn't live without my cell phone. But having the right apps on there to help me are really important. So for like visual schedules, we've listed ChoiceWorks, First Then Visual Schedule are just two apps that are great for that. Again, there's lots more. For social skills app, there's Social Detective and Autism Emotions. Communication apps, again, you're going to want to use whatever the student is already using in class, but a lot of them have an app that they can put on their phone. But there's ProLogo, Touch Chat, things like that. And then executive functioning apps. My Homework, Remember the Milk is a really cool app. I'll be honest, I just shared that one with my son who's 26 to help him with his executive functioning because he has a hard time remembering all the things that he needs to do. So again, utilize these apps to help benefit your students to becoming independent so that you don't have to verbally be reminding them all day. Kevin, you might need to download Remind the Milk too.
Okay.
All right, we've already talked about, you know, there's lots of ways to stay connected through Kentucky Autism Training Center's YouTube, Facebook, Instagram. So just follow us on social media. We've got a lot of good resources we push out. Next slide, Kevin.
I will drop this in the chat. You can just follow that link there.
And it will also be in the email that we send, but yes, giving us that feedback. So our next Parabyte schedule event is scheduled for Monday, November 25th at 9:30. The topic based on y'all's survey results will be visual schedules. Kevin and I are really excited because we're going to be together at the same space because we'll be at the CEC conference that day. So you'll have us live and in person, so to speak, that day. So visual schedules will be our topic next month. Be sure to complete the evaluations. Like I said, Kevin dropped his in the chat there. We'll send you an email that has the links also, as well as lots of resources. So we put a lot of these things in your resource folder as well.
And
We hope you guys are finding these things beneficial. We've enjoyed doing this because, focusing on paraprofessionals is a very necessary thing, but we know that you guys don't get offered a lot of trainings and things. So
And I
we've
know
enjoyed.
there's several high school people in here, and the stuff in the high school section that we kind of skimmed through, all the visual supports and strategies we talked about for elementary and middle school still apply to high school students. I mean, just we need to be mindful of making them age appropriate, but the high school kind of focuses more on transition readiness. But aside from that, any of the visual supports or strategies to promote independence that we've kind of briefly gone over today, if you want more information about that, please email. We'll help guide you through that and send you some resources. Hopefully we can fit your needs. But again, be an active voice within your program. You're a contributing member and take that role to contribute to the program.
We thank you guys for being here. We'll get the follow-up email sent to you, and you guys are free to get back to your students who are missing you.
We've got some questions there.
That's what I was going to say.
Yes, and I do see that a lot. Just we've got to be good communicators and helping parents understand. I guess I should read this for those that are watching a recording. Someone wanted to know about learned helplessness, that kind of being promoted within the family more than school. And I do see that a lot because there are babies and we want them well taken care of and we want them to be happy. And when I say that, I'm not talking about babies, but I view my 15-year-olds as that as well. So it's just helping them understand the importance of promoting independence. And I go back to that one session, one of the first statements on the second slide about even if they are going to be dependent on caregivers down the road, how can we make them less dependent on that caregiver? How can we build up the skills so the caregiver is not doing, too much for them? Because as they progress through life, the skills are going to get tougher and require a little bit more focused effort. So it's important to have parents back off and not do everything for them. But again, that's a conversation to have with the family about how to promote independence across settings, not just in a school setting. But that can often be a tough conversation.
I agree with Kevin there. It's just kind of having that conversation with them. They want to, like you said, they're babies, they're kids, they're trying to do the best that they have, but nobody's given them the tools often as well. And so it's just that conversation and trying to educate them, and letting them know that by backing off a little bit, we really are helping them. We want them to be as independent as possible and that they are capable. Sometimes sending a video of them doing something the parent says they can't do at school and kind of showing them because they're a little shocked. Because the students have learned too that if I act like I can't do it at home, mom or dad or brother or sister does it for me. Good question.
They can do this with their siblings too. I have twins that when my daughter was learning how to tell time in second or first grade, the teacher was like, "Do you need help with that?" She's like, "No, I don't need to learn how to tell time. My brother Jake knows how, and I'm always with him." Always laughing at it. But thank you all for joining us today. I'm going to stop the recording now.